Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video I'm going to be showing you how to take regular everyday household cardboard and turn it into a wonderful scale miniature wooden oak barrel suitable for tabletop skirmish and roleplay games like Dungeons & Dragons, Warhammer Fantasy and all that good stuff. So what do you need to make your very own collection of barrels? You will need rulers, a pencil, pair of household scissors, a craft knife and super glue, or your glue of choice for gluing cardboard. So this is the main ingredient in today's episode. We're going for the regular, super thin, normal packaging cardboard that you get, in this case, in Coca-Cola boxes or crates, but you will also find on cereal boxes, egg cartons, you name it. This stuff is everywhere. And to prepare this surface, we are simply cutting a panel from the box and then neating up the edges. Now the reason why we are doing this is so we've got nice flat straight edges to work from, and the reason why we are using cereal box card instead of something thicker or more durable like medium graphics chipboard is the amount of bending and twisting we're going to be doing with this. This stuff tends to hold up a little bit more than the thicker stuff that when you start to bend it starts to just flake and peel apart. So to make the center of our barrel, we're going to want to measure a strip that's around 3/4 of an inch in width, or a little over 1.5 centimeters. And just using our regular metal safety ruler, simply take your craft knife and cut straight down, cut that strip out. You can, if you prefer, just use a ruler, a pencil and a pair of scissors, but I prefer to use my craft knife. It's what I'm comfortable with. So actually using cereal box card and super glue specifically, there are some lessons that you learn the hard way, but we'll get to that. What we're going to want to do once we've got our strip is to start rolling that up, and you can get a natural curve to cardboard by just running the strip through your thumb and forefinger, as you can see me doing here. But you can also roll it up a little quicker and a little tighter by taking one end and starting to twist that back on itself and then start to tighten it as you roll along itself, like rolling up a carpet or a rug. You want to keep going until you have a piece that's a little over 1/4 inch in thickness or just shy of 1 centimeter. But throughout this process, I'd recommend you have a little model that you can compare for size comparisons all throughout. Now, working with cardboard, one of the things you guys will notice is if you just use super glue straight onto it, the cardboard is naturally porous and it'll just absorb it straight up, and within seconds, as you can see, that is now bone dry to the touch. That super glue is gone. It has impregnated itself into the cardboard. So trying to glue from the inside, it's hard. You need to use a thick super glue or just stick with the shiny gloss paper backed side, right? Either works. As you can see here, I'm going to use the super thick super glue to actually get this initial curl started, the core of the wooden barrel, if you like. But then on the outside, I'm going to use the thin super glue. You can also get the same effect by using thin super glue, acting quickly, doing a long thick bead of it and just rolling it up. But it will inevitably, because of how porous the cardboard is, soak in, so you do need to use quite a bit. I'll say this for this project: work in a well ventilated area. Come on guys, open a window, get some fresh air coming into the room, because super glue smells strong. Now, to make the central binding on the barrel, we're going to want to cut a strip that's around 3/8 of an inch in thickness, in width. This is how we're going to get that wonderful characteristic curve shape to oak barrels that you see both, in your classic fantasy taverns full of ale, or in real life in breweries, and they have those enormous barrels, in cellars underground. By having a band that we've super glued around the central core of the wooden barrel, now we suddenly have a section that we can bend off of. But before we get into using, some cardboard to make the bands, what we need to do is put a cap on the top and the bottom of this central core. If we try and do this later, we're going to be fighting, trying to negotiate all the little bands that we've already put on. It's going to be a struggle. Let's do it now before we get to that part. As you can see throughout, I'm gluing this so that the paper-backed, glossy side is facing out. That's going to make my life easier when it comes to putting those bands on. But putting these end caps on, I mean, you can see I'm just taking a pair of scissors and cutting some discs. It's super easy stuff. Gluing these on is just as easy as taking some of the thick super glue and blobbing that on and just tapping those straight on there. They don't need to be perfectly straight, they just need to be on there. A lot of the sides are all going to be covered by the bands, which is what we're doing now. So this is where all the wonderful little off-cut bits of cardboard come into the picture. So you're going to want to cut strips that aren't the exact matching height of your barrel. You want them to be longer because there's going to be a bit of overhang. Barrels in real life, the bands they form the height of the barrel, right? It's a little different for us because the barrel we're making is solid. It's not a hollow object like a real barrel. But that's fine because what that means is we've got a nice strong internal space that we can bounce things off. Again, we're going to be covering the glue on the coloured paper side of the cardboard, so I'm bending these between my thumb and forefinger so we get a bit of a curve, but with the coloured paper on the inside, because now when I put glue on the barrel, it's coloured paper to coloured paper and there's no risk of that absorption that we saw earlier. So gluing these into place is real nice and easy. You can try and just put glue along all the areas you think the band's going to go, and that can work, but it can also be a race against time because you're trying to get this thing to touch in 3 different points, aren't you? You're trying to get it to touch along the middle and then on either end of the barrel. And all it takes is for one section to not dry in line with the others, and then it's a tug of war as you're trying to hold one section down to then try and glue the other, and it starts to peel away, and it's a real fight. But as you can see, all I'm doing is just lining these things up in the 4 cardinal points, and then when I've got a few on there, I'm going along and I'm trimming any overhang that I dislike, because I want a good 2 mil of space around the top where the cap is, because I'm not cutting this flush, because that wouldn't look authentic to a wooden barrel. But at the same time, I'm not, being too worried about making this neat and perfect. Fantasy barrels aren't neat and perfect. They're a great project for beginners because as fiddly as this looks, it really doesn't take much time. Once you start going around and putting these things on, 4 becomes 8, becomes 12, and then that's it. You've covered nearly every visible section of the middle of the barrel. And you know what? Any cracks or gaps in between the bands look super authentic, because guess what? Oak barrels crack with age. They come apart with age. They don't just, once they're made, they don't just lock together perfectly forever. Although, some really well preserved ones do from like hundreds of years ago. So you've reached this point where you've covered all around the barrel core with the bands, and this looks, as you can see next to this figure, pretty good. By all accounts, this is really nice. You could arguably just paint it here, but we're going to take it that extra step. So how are we going to do that? We're going to cut a thin strip of cardboard around 1 mil in thickness. Again, you can use scissors, you can use a craft knife. It's entirely up to you with what you're comfortable with. And what we're going to do is we're going to attach this around the barrel to represent that metal band that you see in pretty much every photo of a wooden barrel ever that holds it together. And again, it is just as simple as putting a dollop of super glue on there, holding the strip in place so it attaches to the barrel, and then once it's set on there, you can run a bead of super glue up its length and then start to wrap it round. And look at that, look how easy that is. Believe me, it is as satisfying as it looks going on there. It's such a simple technique, but it's super effective. And if you've got a bit more cardboard than you need as you wrap round, that's fine. Just layer it up, because at the end of the day, you can cut off any excess. And you know what? Metal bands, sometimes they do overlap themselves in real life. So it's semi-authentic. And that, fundamentally, is it. You've done it. with a bit of extra super glue to make sure everything's locked in place, you're done. And there you go. You have made your first fantasy wooden barrel. Honestly, you could put a layer of paint on this and call it done. Which, you know, when you compare it to our little medieval guy here, looks absolutely fantastic. And these are super quick to make. As you can see, I've made 3 in like the last 20 minutes, because the nice thing is you can just mechanically churn these guys out. So let's have a look at a couple of different ways that we can decorate or change these. So one way is we can change the metal banding with rope, or with a rope-like effect. Is it that accurate? Yeah, maybe not, but does it add a nice bit of variety? Yeah, it does. And I'm sure if you look hard enough out there, there'll be some like 18th century source of some pirate vessel that had barrels that were bound with rope instead of metal banding because they were running short on metal in some English coastal province. But it's not about that. It's about going, right, rule of cool, what looks good, and diversity of materials, the different materials you have on your builds, the different ways you want to paint them. It stands out on the tabletop and it looks really good. And string, any just regular string or twine, honestly just glues on perfectly fine with super glue. And as you can see with the pair of scissors, just cut it to length, twist the ends together to sort of create the suggestion that they might have been tied or knotted or bound together in some way. The really nice thing with string and thread is it already has that twisted rope look with all the individual strands and fibers. So yeah, you can have fun with using that as a material. If you ever struggle keeping the string down as well, just use the flat of your craft knife to hold it in place while the super glue sets. And another technique you can use is, because ultimately barrels didn't just hold liquids, they would hold solids as well. They would hold grain, gunpowder, salted fish, you name it. So why don't we see if we can recreate some of those using hot glue now? So I've put down some baking paper, some greaseproof paper, because it stops the hot glue from sticking to the work surface. But simply put a bead of that on top, and honestly, with a bit of bicarbonate of soda or baking powder, you can create a nice fine powdery textured finish without having to use something as thick and as granular as sand. Now, don't get me wrong, this isn't like the bicarb and super glue trick, right? This doesn't set immediately. It will cover the hot glue, and in some cases it will actually stop it from spreading further on its route around, but you can still push it a bit. It is still a bit malleable. But it's not just about making a barrel that looks like the lid has been removed, it's also about making barrels that look like they've been pierced or broken open and the contents have started to spill out. And this is where the wonderful fluid nature of hot glue comes in handy, because with a simple bit of bicarbonate of soda, the baking powder, you can just sprinkle that on, and before you know it, you've created an effect that looks like a barrel of gunpowder or a barrel of flour has split open, and it's just dribbling out, it's just pouring out the side. Super easy, super effective technique, and honestly, once it's set, looks fantastic and is a breeze to paint. This is why I say that wooden barrels are one of the easiest crafts, one of the best crafts. If you are new to crafting and you feel like a cardboard house might be a bit too much to start with, you can make a wooden barrel. Because the nice thing is, even if you make them really big, because you're not quite comfortable making them super small, it's perfectly fine, because you get massive barrels in real life, absolutely massive. And but let's have a look at some finished shots now of these barrels, and here they are. So as you can see, we've got our normal metal bound oak barrels, we've got our rope bound pirate barrel, and then we've got our barrels spilling gunpowder and flour. And honestly, I can't recommend these enough. They paint up in seconds. Come on guys, it's a simple brown base coat, dry brush on some beige, give it a wash around the metal banding areas after you've put some metal paint on there, and that is it, you are done. The nice thing about these is the cardboard, the actual texture of the cardboard tends to have a little bit of a wood grain look to it anyway, so you don't even have to worry about like making sure they look perfectly accurate. They look better than a lot of the stuff you can get out there in the stores. Wonderful little technique, wonderful little tutorial. I hope you guys have enjoyed it, and honestly I want to see what you guys come up with. I want to see what kind of barrels you guys can make and different ways you can use them. I know some great people on YouTube, they've made tutorials making like giant barrel golems and robots and monsters and things, or use them in larger terrain builds or barricades. They are a wonderful, versatile little bit of scenery, and trust me, you will have a barrel of laughs making them. So, as always, thank you so much for watching to the end of the video. If you found this tutorial useful, please leave a like and a comment and subscribe to the channel. Have a look at some of the other tutorials in the series, and yeah, check back soon for the next episode on how to build the fantasy medieval village. Thank you for coming along for the ride.